Alright, we're back to it with part 3 of my rankings of my favorite movies of all time. This is going to cover movies 10 to 1, so this will be the final part, and I hope you guys enjoy. Like and subscribe and hit that notification bell, and if you're new, check out the rest of the channel and let me know what you think. Let's dive into my favorite movies of all time, part 3. Alright, starting off the list, just cracking the top 10 is Avengers Infinity War. Now, listen, I don't think this movie is some mastercraft in cinema making, but seeing this movie in the theater was one of the most enjoyable theater experiences I've ever had. Especially considering all the events that took place before it, like Ragnarok and Civil War. There was a lot of stuff that set this movie up to be just an incredible roller coaster ride. And considering we had been waiting so long from the end of Ultron to this for the next Avengers movie, like, it was just, there was so much anticipation that was built up for everybody. And seeing that teaser trailer that leaked from Hall H, I mean, it's just like, everybody was hyped for this movie. And then it did something that a lot of the movies in this franchise haven't done before. It added stakes to this universe. People died. Main characters died. People's favorite heroes died. I mean, in the first, 5 minutes of the movie, 3 people get killed off. So it sort of took a complaint that a lot of people had about this franchise, even though it's beloved, but it always felt like nobody could ever die. And they finally addressed that, sort of. I know a lot of it gets undone in the next film, but then even in Endgame, you have Tony's sacrifice. So I think Marvel is seeing some of the errors in their ways, hopefully. I mean, we all know Phase 4 and 5 weren't spectacular, so I really hope they are. I hope they can kind of get their footing back. But this movie, it just did something different for this franchise. You know, it was we got to see our heroes, the heroes that we all love, in their darkest moment. They were all split off into 3 different groups, you know, no communication with each other, fighting these enemies that they had never fought before, and just being completely overwhelmed by the power of them. And Thanos is just an incredible villain, amazing CGI, incredible performance by Josh Brolin, and pretty much everybody that we've ever seen in this franchise pops up in this movie, and they all kind of get their own time to shine. And this movie's just epic. There's so many wow, incredible moments, a lot like Endgame, and I do love Endgame. I know these movies are kind of part 1 and part 2 to each other, but I just think Infinity War is a more complete movie experience, where Endgame is just kind of like a rush of emotions, if that makes sense. So yeah, starting off this list, number 10, Avengers Infinity War. Coming in at number 9 is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Not only is this my favorite Indiana Jones film, I think it's undeniably the best. I love Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was not, and am still not, the biggest fan of Temple of Doom. Honestly, Temple of Doom is probably the weakest in my opinion. But then George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford came back with Sean Connery and made The Last Crusade, and it's fantastic. I think this movie has the highest highs of this franchise. It's just and it's so enjoyable. The biggest piece of this movie that always sticks with me, and it even I rewatched this last year for the first time in a while, probably 5 years. And I think the thing that still to this day sticks out to me is the chemistry between Connery and Harrison Ford. We all know they were only in real life 13 years apart or something like that, but you buy it on screen, and just their interactions with each other, their back and forth, their banter, it is incredible. I would put this up there with some of the best on-screen chemistry that's ever been put to film. It's that good. These two actors for whatever reason, just bounce so well off each other. And it's just so funny watching them interact, and like Connery just continually just push Indiana's buttons, and like it's so enjoyable. It's the best aspect of this film. The action sequences in this film are so memorable for this whole franchise. Indiana riding the tank and almost going over the cliff. The trials that Indy has to go through in the climax to reach the Holy Grail are just so creative, and honestly, for their time, just like amazing how they did those. And they still hold up today. And not only that, it's just like this movie, I feel like more than most in the franchise, head of characters that they utilize. They bring Sala back, who's always awesome. Marcus actually goes on the adventure with Indy. You know, I mean, that actor has since passed away, so it sucks he could never return to the franchise. But again, then you have Sean Connery added to the mix, who him and Harrison Ford are just electric together. And I think, you know, this movie just has some of the most emotional, impactful scenes in this franchise. Like at the end, when the whole temple's collapsing and Indy is reaching for the Grail, and all that Henry Sr. has to say is like, he calls Indy by his preferred name, and Indy's like, holy shit, my dad actually cares a shit ton for me. And it's just like one simple line like that, and it's just such an emotionally impactful sequence. And I think the writing in this one is just so much more effective than most of the others. And the other big thing about this movie, for me, this is a personal thing. My grandfather wasn't into movies as much as I was, but he loved the Indiana Jones films. And when I was a kid and I would like stay the weekends at their house, one that me and him would stay up late and watch the most, and he loved this movie. So it's also got kind of this deep personal connection for me as well. And I mean, outside of that, it's just an awesome movie. So yeah, I love this one. I think it's the best Indiana Jones movie, and it's my favorite. In at number 8 is Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. If I could put, you know what, screw it. We're gonna cheat on this one. This is the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. I love all three of these movies pretty much equally. I will say I think Return of the King edges out the other two just because of how emotional this one has. Some of the most emotional moments in this franchise that just resonate with me so much. And just bringing this crazy saga just to an incredible final climax. It just does that job so well, and then more so. This whole franchise, not just this one, but like they utilize practical effects, location shooting, all of that so well. And Peter Jackson coming in is pretty much a complete unknown director and just going to town with this trilogy of books and just making one of the most incredible feats in filmmaking history, in my opinion. I mean, I would say in the history of filmmaking, this is the best movie trilogy that's ever been made. Like, quality-wise, it is insanely incredible. And I cannot believe that he did this. Just everything, the cast, the performances. Like, I remember this was a gift, seeing this movie when I was like 10 or 11 from one of my brothers on Christmas. It was either Christmas night or the day after Christmas. And I just remember, 3 hours long for a 10, 11-year-old can feel like an eternity. But I remember sitting there in awe, just wanting to see more, because that's how amazing this movie was. Just all the battle sequences out in the fields in front of Gondor, and like all the inspiring moments that send chills down your spine. It's just amazing. And I rewatch this movie and this trilogy probably once a year. That's how like emotionally resonant they are with me. And I love the aspect of this film. This is, I never read the books before this. I since have, but realizing towards the climax of this film that, like, no shade to Frodo, he is a hero in this story, obviously, but realizing that the true hero of this whole narrative is Sam. Like, Sam, who is just kind of started off as this side character, is the one that just broke his back dragging Frodo to the end to complete this mission to save the world. And like, Frodo even at one point, acknowledges this, and then just them finally being done with this after a year and a half journey through just like the darkest places in the world, just laying on a rock reminiscing about the Shire and their past lives and some of the few enjoyable moments they've had. Like, it's just so, it brings you to tears every time. I think this movie, I probably cry more in this movie than any other movie. And like, I think people, like, especially women, probably think it's silly, but like, I know more guys that cry during this movie than any other film, to be honest. And it's just, that shows you like how much time, care, and effort not only Peter Jackson, but the writers and the costume designers and the actors and everyone involved put into this film. And it's just that amazing. Coming in at number 7 is Mission Impossible Fallout. You know what? I meant to switch these before I started recording and I didn't. So we're going to say number 7's return. Well, number 7 is the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy. And number 8 is Fallout. We're just going to Giroux. I'll be honest with you, I was never a fan of the Mission Impossible series. I had never really seen any of them growing up. I had kind of a negative opinion of Tom Cruise for a lot of my teenage years that I've since flipped on. And then I remember that's the crazy thing about these top 10. Like, I remember everything I was doing. These top 10 films for me, I just remember distinctly the first time I saw all of them and what I was doing. But I remember I was somewhere for a work training and I was staying in a hotel and there was a theater like a mile down the street, and I was on like this 4-day training trip, and I was like, I need something to do. And then I was like looking at what movies were out, and I remember Fallout came out, and I was like, I don't really like these movies, but like it might be fun to go see. And then I just remember reading all the reviews and people just saying how incredible it was and it's the best one in the franchise, and I was like, all right, well, I'll go, see for myself. And I remember walking out of that theater just being like, why the fuck have I never watched these movies in my life? Because that was amazing. And it's still my favorite one in the franchise to this day. And I've watched all of them. I saw Dead Reckoning opening night 2 years ago or whatever, and it was also amazing. These movies, like, I know some people look at them like they're just basic action films. They're all kind of the samey, which is a little bit true. Like, but I think the characters progress enough and enough changes happen that it doesn't always feel like you're watching the same movie every time. It also helps that you have Tom Cruise, who in my opinion is the last great movie star living today. Like, you put that guy in any film, it's going to sell tickets just by putting his name on the poster. There's not a lot of actors still around like that. And he just, I think, my opinion flipped on him probably like 10 years ago, but I think my opinion even became even more positive towards him during COVID, because like, you can tell that this guy, sure, he's a rich, wealthy, famous movie star, but you can tell he very much cares about his craft, every aspect of it, and he really cares about this industry that he's a part of. And he was the one I remember during COVID just pushing and pushing for the movie industry to just, keep going and just push through all these challenges just to stay alive, because that's how much he cares about movies and movie making. And I feel like he just puts his heart and soul into every project he's a part of, even if it doesn't turn out the way that you want it to. In this movie, I think just like you see that full blown. I mean, every aspect of this movie, from the narrative to the characters to the performances to the insane stunt set pieces and action sequences, like, Tom Cruise and this cast bring their all. And it kind of brings that storyline that was set up in Rogue Nation to a close, which is cool. And then you add in Henry Cavill, who, I think everyone kind of expected from the trailer that he was going to turn heel, but like, he's a great villain, even though you kind of see the twist coming the entire way. That's like my one negative aspect of this movie. But he's so good as a villain. Just this cocky, just piece of shit that you just want to see get their ass beat at the end. And like, it's so good. And I don't know, I love this franchise and I love this movie, and I'm thankful that I like took a chance and went and saw it. And from then on got to enjoy the rest of these because Tom Cruise is a master at his game. At number 6 is Jurassic Park, one of 2 movies, the other which is higher on this list, that really solidified my interest in movies, I would say. I remember seeing this movie when I was super young, probably too young, honestly, and just loving it. And say what you will about this franchise, there's a lot of bad movies in it. I think they're all enjoyable for just like most of them, not this one. I just want to clarify that. I think most of them are enjoyable, just as dumb, fun, turn your brain off types of movies. And that's fine. I mean, that's what Fast and the Furious is. I mean, people love that shit, so. Anyway. But these first 2, I would say, I'm a big defender of the Lost World Jurassic Park. I never understood why that movie gets so much heat. I think, look, I don't think it's as good as this one. I think it's a very good movie, though. I think it deserves more credit than it gets, and I think people should take another look at it because it's very good. And Jeff Goldblum as the leading man is even better. But yeah, the first one, for sure, one of my favorite movies of all time. This cast is amazing. I mean, you got Sam Neill, Laura Dern, Jeff Goldblum, Sir Richard Attenborough, and even Samuel L. Jackson himself that pops up. And I mean, Steven Spielberg, which I would say in his prime, I mean, there was this era between the 90s and early 2000s where he was just on freaking fire. This movie is a masterclass in like slow building monster horror, but also there's just so much heart and soul to this film and such good like themes and messages that are just sewn throughout. And I know this movie is highly rated and people love it, but anytime I hear people talk about their appreciation of this film, it's always about the effects, the characters, and the action, which are all phenomenal, don't get me wrong. But I think this movie is even more impactful because of its messages. You know, it's all about humans playing God and the repercussions of that, and how when we accomplish or try to accomplish these fantastic scientific feats, like, we need to stop and take a look and just take a step back and say, like, is this worth it? Like, should we be doing this? And that's the whole point of this movie. And I think a lot of people, when they like talk negatively about this film, they overlook that fact, which I think is the most important part of this movie. Like, I think in my mind, like, something that I'm very skeptical of is AI. That's just me personally. I know a lot of people are. And for me, this movie resonates at a time like this so much. I mean, you think about, like, Dr. Malcolm in this film, just like when they're at that lunch table in the compound, and he's saying, like, look, you have these scientists that they're too preoccupied with what they can do that they don't even stop to think, like, should we be doing this? And I think that's such a powerful message and such a powerful question that, like, the scientific community always needs to have at the forefront. Because a lot of times, like, we're an imperfect human race. A lot of times we're messing things that are sometimes outside of the realm of our full scope of knowledge. You create consequences and people get hurt. And that's never more evident than in this film. I mean, there's like so many people die in this movie because of the actions of these scientists and John Hammond. And along with that, I mean, I think Steven Spielberg he crafts this movie so well, just portraying those themes on film and also making it enjoyable for all types of audiences. And I think that's the biggest accomplishment that this movie has. I mean, everything from the sets, the practical robotic dinosaurs, the location shooting in Hawaii. This movie has an aura about it, an aesthetic, and you feel it every time you sit down to watch it. It's that incredible. I think this film, more than most, and like a lot of the other films on this list, they immerse you in this universe and in this world so well. And that is a testament to Steven Spielberg, the writers, and the whole team that put this movie together, because it's incredible. I mean, and the effects, it's amazing how this movie came out in 1995, something like that. This whole movie, it just stands the test of time. It holds up so well. Like, I watched this past year again, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, this still looks so amazing. And so many good characters, like I said, such good writing, so many quotable scenes and quotable just one-liners from this film. It's amazing. It's one of the best in cinema history, in my opinion. Coming in at number 5 is Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners. I think before I saw this movie, I didn't really know who Denis Villeneuve was, and this movie premiered and it was getting just rave reviews. And I love Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman, 2 of my favorite actors working today, so I was like, yeah, let's go. And I was blown away. The writing, the performances, so good. So many twists and turns in this story that, like, you're always on your feet thinking, like, okay, who took these girls? Where are they? Did Paul Dano's character actually have anything to do with it, or is he just getting, like, mercilessly tortured by Hugh Jackman for no reason at all? And it's just this great film about, like, you know, one of the questions in this movie is, like, what if you were in this situation like Hugh Jackman? Like, what would you do to get your daughter back alive? Like, how far would you go? And he goes almost the entire way, and it's insane to watch. Like, Jackman just loses it in this film in a good way. Like, just goes so far insanely out there with his anger and just this crazy lunatic side of him that just goes all in, and it's insane to watch. And then you have Gyllenhaal just playing this, like, brooding, highly skilled, highly intelligent detective who has, like, he's just so, like, introverted though towards other people, you know, like, everyone he meets he gives a cold shoulder. He has no bedside manner during this case, like, whatsoever. Incredible in it. And just, like, the way this story plays out, and the kind of twist at the end, and then the cliffhanger ending, you're always wondering, like, oh my god, is Hugh Jackman gonna die in that hole, or is he gonna get saved? And it's just so fantastic to watch. And the way that kind of, like, the religious undertones are kind of woven into the story of this film and this crime that's been committed, it's so good. And the atmosphere of this movie, Villeneuve just knocks it out of the park. Like, the camera work's amazing, and just having this set in, like, the hills of, I think it was outside of Pittsburgh, I want to say, is where they filmed this. Like, in the time of year, like, during the winter, this crime, this narrative, the scenery, all of it fits so cohesively, and this is such a good movie. And I know when people talk about Denis Villeneuve films, they always rank this one towards kind of the middle of the pack. This is my favorite movie he's made by far. I still rewatch it to this day. Even with all the twists, once they're kind of realized, I still go back and I'm still, like, surprised every time, because that's how good the writing and directing of this movie is. If you've never seen it, highly recommend. At number 4 is The Godfather. The memory I have for this one is it's, I think, the first rated R movie I ever watched, and I remember my dad turned it on, and this is one of the scenes that has always stuck with me in my life, is when Sonny gets shot up at the toll booth, just like 1,000 bullets. I remember watching that. I was probably, like, honestly 8 years old, and just being like, what the fuck is this? And it scarred me for a little bit, honestly, but it's just one of those scenes, man, in cinema that just kind of sits with you. This movie's so good. The performances, the writing. I've even watched, like, documentaries on how this is made. I watched that miniseries they made too a few years back on Paramount Plus about the making of The Godfather. I don't know how accurate that was, but it's just so interesting. Like, it was such a struggle to get this movie made, even though the book was, like, beloved by, you know, readers everywhere. The mob was, like, very skeptical. They thought this was gonna, like, take down their entire business organization, and it was just like, they tried to interfere with this at like every point until they got like, they got brought in on it and asked to like, why don't you guys give your opinion and like we'll listen and things like that. And I thought that was just so interesting. This movie took actors who were sort of, not Marlon Brando, because he was already pretty well known at the time and just an incredible performance, obviously. But it took actors just, like Al Pacino, James Caan, Robert Duvall, who weren't these, super well-known actors. I mean, Al Pacino was a I guess famous stage actor in New York at the time, but he wasn't like this famous international movie star. And they took these guys and then like, what did they have? Like 4 nominations for Best Actor at the Oscars for this movie? It's just insane. And it's so good. It's this mafia pick that like, if you're used to like the mafia movies in the 90s and you've never seen this, you're gonna be shell-shocked because it's not like this shoot 'em up like crime-laden mafia film where around the corner, someone's getting taken out in a hit or someone's getting robbed, etc. This is a very slow burning film, and that's one of the main reasons why I love it. You get to just live in this world for 2 or so hours and just feel every moment of it. And it's just, the themes and story are so impactful. Like Michael, who never wanted any part of this business, he was actually sort of ashamed of it. He's kind of forced into it because of the love he still has for his father. And once his father almost dies, he's like, all right, this is my dad. I have to step up and do something. And then they take out Sonny, and then it falls on Michael's plate. And then he just, it's just this tragic downfall where he becomes the thing he never wanted to become. And it's one of those movies that stick with you. And it's always on the top, it's always in like the top 5 of 100 best films of all time or whatever, and deservedly so. I mean, this movie changed filmmaking in the film industry forever, and it deserves all the credit it gets. At number 3 is No Country for Old Men. Not only what I think is probably the best modern Western ever made, but I think it's one of the best Westerns, full stop, of all time. This movie is incredible. I think it's the best movie the Coen brothers have ever done. I know a lot of people will argue Fargo. I love Fargo. It's a classic, obviously. No Country for Old Men has just always stuck with me. This has to be probably the most serious film the Coen brothers have ever made. It's the best thriller they've ever made, in my opinion. It's so good. The cast is just incredible. I mean, you got Josh Brolin, Tommy Lee Jones, who's just, one of the greats of all time. You got Woody Harrelson. You got the world being introduced to Javier Bardem in that fucking awful haircut. But it works for this movie. Javier won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, which was well deserved because this might be one of the best on-screen villains of all time. Anton Chigurh is terrifying. Every time I go back and rewatch this movie, like anytime he's on screen, it gives me physical just chills down my body because he just disappears into this role. This guy is someone not to be messed with, and like you get that sense in every single scene he's in. The worst is when Woody Harrelson's character comes back to his hotel and Anton's sitting there waiting for him, and you're like, well, this guy's dead. But they draw that scene out for so long just to make you just like feel every moment of it and every moment of anxiety that's clearly going through Harrelson's character's head. Josh Brolin, also great in this movie. I think his performance doesn't get talked about enough. It's a very quiet, reserved performance, but it's also very calculating. While, if you've seen this movie, you know the ending, like his character dies, and while Chigurh gets the jump on him at the end, he's just as intelligent and just as formidable as Chigurh is. I mean, he goes toe-to-toe with him on multiple occasions, outsmarting him multiple times along the way, and I don't think Brolin's role in this gets talked about enough. I mean, this was kind of like his return to Hollywood as well. He was a child actor, and then he took a break. I believe he went into finance. Like, I think he was a trader on the stock market, if I'm not mistaken. And then he kind of came back and found his passion with film again. And what a way to, like, make your comeback to Hollywood. In a movie like this, in a role like this, it's just incredible. Tommy Lee Jones also just such a haunting performance. You know, as this old sheriff getting ready to retire, just seeing this horrific crime play out, and then having to try and unravel this spider web of just like chaos in front of him, and he just not know what the fuck to do. And like, he's just at his wit's end with all the horrible shit he's seen in his life, and like, you feel so bad for the guy. Like, he's just trying to understand how this evil could like exist in this world and can't make sense of any of it. And I think one thing that's always resonated with me about this film is the sound design and sound production. It is incredible. Every little sound that a character makes in every single scene in this movie, it's so audible and it's so good. Like, I don't know who is in charge or who got hired on to do the sound work in post, but it's amazing. For whatever reason, this film, I always think about that. That's like one of the first things that jumps out to me when I go back and talk about this film, or think about this film, or rewatch this film. It's just the sound design is incredible. Every aspect of the production of this movie is amazing. The Coen brothers really knocked it out of the park. I mean, the location shooting, the sets, the cinematography, it's all incredible. The music is incredible. The score is incredible. It all just leads to this haunting feeling that sits with you for the entire duration of the movie. And it's amazing. At number 2 is The Empire Strikes Back, a movie that, with Jurassic Park, kind of cemented my interest in movies when I was a kid. I would venture to say that this was probably the first live action movie I ever saw. I can't prove that, like 4 or 5 when I saw it, but when I look back in my memory, that's what I remember. And I just remember like falling in love with movies after I saw this. It's just like, the original Star Wars, as incredible as it is, which it is, it's still amazing, still holds up. Empire Strikes Back was just like, I remember watching it and seeing the Han twist where he gets frozen and like taken away, and it's just like, you see your hero get captured and you're like, whoa, what is this? Like, heroes are supposed to win. And then Luke get his hand cut off, and Vader, the big reveal that everybody knows. I mean, it's spoiled for everybody nowadays because it's so embedded in pop culture. But when Vader reveals that he's Luke's father, it's just like, I remember like seeing this for the first time and be like, you can do this in a movie? Like, movies can do this? You can have twists like this and like have you just like pissed off and just like emotional all at the same time. And like, I just remember how it changed just my whole outlook on movies, even at such a young age. And I fell in love with Star Wars, even nowadays, even though I have like such an up and down relationship with Star Wars. Like, I love the original trilogy, obviously, it's great. I grew up with the prequel trilogy. I will admit, I will be the first to admit, the prequel trilogy is not great. They're not very good films, but I do think they're way better than the sequel trilogy. I think the sequel trilogy's hot garbage. And then like the shows, there's been some good ones, there's been some bad ones. I think at this point, they're just dragging out the IP way too much. But I digress. This Empire Strikes Back is the absolute pinnacle of this franchise. And it's like, you have all the characters you love. I mean, we get introduced to Lando in this movie, even though he's a backstabbing asshole. Like, towards the middle of the film, he, joins the heroes at the end. It's great. Like I said, Han frozen in carbonite, one of the most like emotional moments of my childhood, where I'm just like, oh my god, that's my favorite character, what's happening? And like, you think he's dead the whole time, even though they kind of reveal he's not dead, but like, it's so good. And god, the practical effects. This movie was made in the 70s. That's insane. And they still look good. all of the miniature ships, everything. They look amazing. And yeah, it's so good. There's a reason this movie has stood the test of time, and it's because its story is just so impactful to audiences everywhere. And it truly is a masterclass in filmmaking. At number 1, finally, my favorite film of all time, The Dark Knight. I mean, what is there left to say about this movie? It is fantastic. It changed what comic book and could be and the trajectory of that entire genre. It's just so good as this prime epic disguised as a Batman film. And Nolan and Chris and Jonathan Nolan pulled out all stops for this film. I mean, you thought, and you were worried that after the success that Batman Begins had and the praise that movie received being so different and just so grounded and serious compared to most superhero movies, you were nervous to see if this franchise fell victim to sequelitis, and it didn't. And this movie shocked the world with how good it was and how far it exceeded its predecessor. I mean, where do we even begin? Obviously Heath Ledger, an amazing performance, died for this role essentially and was awarded an Oscar, rightfully so, for it. I mean, just an incredible performance all around, just disappearing into the character of the Joker. The best on-screen Joker we've ever had. I don't care. It's the truth. But I think because of that performance, all the other performances get overlooked. I mean, Michael Caine, always solid, great as Alfred, just a fantastic casting choice from the original film. Christian Bale, I feel like, has always been overlooked in this role. I don't think it's like his best work. Obviously, the dude is an amazing actor, and he's gone on to do so many insane performances. And I'm not saying this performance is Oscar worthy, but he's a very good Bruce Wayne and he's a very good Batman. I mean, he's able to kind of transition between both roles because it is sort of a dual role. And he's great. And he just has this on-screen presence more than a lot of leading men do that take on superhero roles, I think. And I remember him being cast in Batman Begins. Everybody was like, what is happening? Because he wasn't a star. He was kind of like this indie movie guy at this time. He started his career as a child actor and kind of disappeared into doing smaller budget films, and this was really his big break back into Hollywood. And he's great. I mean, he's a great Batman. Aaron Eckhart, who, say what you will about his career choices since this movie, because it's been pretty awful. He's a great Harvey Dent, even better Two-Face. When he makes that transition at the end, it's heartbreaking, it's compelling, and he sells it all the way. He's a very good actor. He just, a lot like Nicolas Cage, he chooses very, very awful movies to participate in. Maggie Gyllenhaal, a newcomer to this franchise after Katie Holmes was recast, which I think was a great idea. I think she's a way better Rachel than Katie Holmes. Seems way more invested in this character and in this film. She has way better chemistry with all the characters involved. And you see her, even if it was only for this one film, even though she meets her tragic demise about halfway through. Morgan Freeman's back, always solid, obviously. Gary Oldman's also back as Jim Gordon, an inspired Jim Gordon choice. Gary Oldman, I think prior to this film, had always done, he's always taken on some very eccentric roles, some kind of weird roles. This was, at least for me, the first role I'd seen him in that was like very grounded and serious, and he really got to show his acting talents, I think, in that realm. And he's great. I love the twist with his character. The first time I saw this movie, it got me. I was like, holy shit, they really just killed Gordon off? No way. And then, it's revealed after they captured the Joker that he, they faked his death, and it was a great. I love that twist in this film. This film has a lot of twists, actually, which is kind of the standard for Nolan movies, but the Joker plans his escape from getting captured and then escaping from jail. He mixes up the addresses on purpose, so Batman goes after Harvey instead of Rachel. I mean, this movie, it keeps you on your toes the entire time. It's fantastic. The whole notion of like the Joker just pulling down all the good that Batman, Harvey, and Gordon have done and just destroying this city from within and trying to destroy the aura around Batman and just pull him down to his level and show everyone that like he's not special. Like he's not going to save everyone. The people who invest in the chaos are still the ones who are in control of this city. And at multiple points in this film, I mean, he breaks Bruce, he breaks Batman, you know, with Rachel's death, with all the chaos he causes, he gets to Bruce. And then it's not until the end where Bruce realizes, like, okay, he can win if I let him win. But I have to show him that I'm willing to do whatever it takes, shy of killing him, to inspire this city and give hope to the people who feel the criminality of this city every day. And it's an incredible story. And like, I remember this movie, I remember when this came out, I saw the midnight premiere in 2008. I waited in line for like 3 hours. It was just a whole thing. I was so excited. This is my favorite comic book movie character of all time. And like the Batman movies before this, some of them have been okay. I know like people love Batman and Batman Returns. I was never a fan of the Burton films. They're fine. The Schumacher ones were awful. And then they released Batman Begins, and I was like, wow. So they're starting to understand this character, what he is, his story, and they're doing it right. And I remember sitting in the theater for the climax of this movie, or for the conclusion of this movie. And this is one of the few times in the theater at this point in my life. It happens frequently now, but I remember, like, if Empire Strikes Back and Jurassic Park got me into films, this movie solidified like my love and my passion for movies. I remember sitting there at the end when Gordon gives his monologue to his son about what kind of hero Batman is, what he needs to stand for, and why he's so important to this city. And, you know, at the end when Batman's riding the motorcycle up the freeway ramp and his monologue plays over top with him saying, like, he's not a hero, he's a dark knight. And, like, I remember chills just down my spine. And, like, it's still to this day when I rewatch this movie, which is probably, like, once a year, honestly, that entire scene at the end, it still gets me. It's just such great writing. The music in that scene, just the epicness of it, it's so good. This movie really is like a superhero epic. And both Nolans just did fantastic work with this sequel. And it's just a masterclass in writing, production, direction, everything. And that's why this is my favorite movie of all time. It just sticks with me. Anytime, you know, I talk about movies or think about movies or see new movies, like, I always come back to this one. It changed what movies could be for me. A lot like Jurassic Park, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the King before it. It did that, but to a whole nother level, and it's just something I can't even quantify or explain. But it's the best.